There he is. Good morning, Alistair.
Good morning, Brian.
I think we're top of the hour here, 8:01 on my side at least, on the West Coast. We definitely may have a few folks coming in from different parts of the country today.
Yep.
Looks like we have a good little audience out there. Are you ready to go?
I'm fine. Yeah, good to go.
Fantastic. So why don't we kick this off and just say good morning to everyone out there, and thank you for attending part 3 of the Fastman November mini-series webinar. This one focused in on Permissions Manager and best practices and new features. As the name indicates, I'm not sure if you all were aware of attended, but it was preceded by 2 others, of course. We focused in on bulk data managers best practices earlier in the month, and then even some new features in the Fastman connector for OpenText and DocuSign. And so we focused in on that earlier this month that were very successful. I'm Brian Lapointe. I'm the VP of Sales for Fastman in the Americas. And I'm pleased to be introducing today's presenter, Alistair Grigg, who's the Managing Director for Fastman. Both Alistair and myself have been in the OpenText ecosystem for quite some time now and bring a wealth of knowledge in deploying and using information management systems to the ecosystem. Happy to be here with you today. We're doing these short length sessions, these mini-series. Will be 30 minutes in length, and we'll focus in on today a few important new capabilities being added to the next release of Permissions Manager. And we recognize as your information management systems are growing significantly larger and more complex, there's the need for these types of enhancements that we're putting in. And they're especially helpful to those using those large systems, using business workspaces, deploying extended ECM solutions, wanting to have your content in a single point of truth to line up with your driving or your primary line of business applications that you're running. And so having the right tools to help you is where Fastman comes in to fill those gaps for you. This is an interactive presentation where I'll be monitoring the chat window throughout, so please ask your questions and so forth. Love the feedback as always. So we encourage you to ask your questions, and without any further ado, Alistair, I'm pleased to hand control over to you and take it away.
Thank you, Brian. And hello, everybody. As Brian said, the intention of today is to give you a little bit of an update on Permissions Manager, some of the new releases, and also give us an opportunity to talk about some of the features we don't often get to speak about when we're doing presentations or customers are first using the product. Some of the times when we do a presentation of Permissions Manager, it can take sort of an hour or 90 minutes. And by the time we get to some of the advanced features that people find very useful and probably more relevant these days, the attention span starts to go. So we thought we'd take this opportunity to highlight a couple of those things. Just mainly for the people who aren't familiar with Fastman, and I know there's a mixture of customers, existing customers, long-time customers. Thank you for joining us. It's really nice to see people again. We don't get out and about, obviously, face-to-face, but these webinars give us a chance to connect and catch up. But for those of you who are not familiar with Fastman, we have been around for over 14 years, and most of us in the business have been in the industry for longer than that, and working with OpenText for 20 odd years, thereabouts. So we've been around. We are an OpenText partner. We're a DocuSign Silver partner. If those of you who've been watching this little series have seen the one on DocuSign as well. And we're also now an SAP partner in the open ecosystem. So pleased to add that one to our portfolio. So if you're interested in any of those areas, please come and see us. And we are focused in this context on the products that we're dealing with rather than the services we provide to customers. And just quickly, just background again, we have a lot of customers in a lot of countries. As I mentioned, quite a few on the call. So thank you very much for joining. If your name's on here, thank you especially. But there's a lot of customers all around the globe using our products these days. And even though some of the products are well proven, have been deployed for a long time, they are still getting good take up, which is really, really good. And today we're talking about security, and that's a big deal with the way the world is these days. So information is power, is value. OpenText, SAP, DocuSign, all the vendors in this world talk about the value of the information. And I know from my own point of view, running Fastman, that one of the critical assets we have in our business is the information about what we do and how we do it, and so on. So it must be protected. This is the basic premise. I'm not going to go through a long story here because most of you are familiar with it. Those of you who have been using Permissions Manager for a number of years maybe haven't heard this little side of it though, which is becoming much more prevalent these days, and I think it's driving a lot of the extended ECM take up around success factors and S4 for HANA and all that sort of stuff, and Salesforce, and that's the information security message and how it relates to obligations inside your organization. So GDPR came in a couple of years ago. Most people are familiar with that. CCPA in the last year or so became active. I think it's 12 months now since it really became effective here in California. But ISO 27000 is very, very important for a lot of customers. So as I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of organizations being forced or even wanting to effectively comply with those types of obligations. And by doing so, using Permissions Manager in their extended ECM or their traditional content suite systems to make sure they do meet those requirements. So really interesting that even though we started selling Permissions Manager over 10 years ago now, as time's gone on, it's actually become more and more relevant. And what we're talking about today is largely built on a lot of that. So I'm not going to bore you with this. I think you know a lot of the click questions and why Permissions Manager exists. But it's really important for us today to talk about the security and permissions complexity in OTCS or in extended ECM. This is only a content server, doesn't really include the extended ECM features, but you can see a lot of these boxes that represent a reasonable amount of functionality and a good amount of control needed. Now these all play into the security model in content server and extended ECM, and it's a complex world. So this is what you guys are dealing with every day. It's not easy. People think, oh, just provide access. The permissions model is at the center of all of this. Either it's role-based permissions or it's traditional permissions, ACL lists and so on. The permissions model is at the center of it. Records management, archiving is becoming far more of a focus for customers these days, and OpenText has obviously got some extremely good products in that area and well-proven products that scale really well. But it's becoming more complex. It's not as if we've moved from a world which, traditionally you buy a product, you sell a product, or you develop a product, I should say, and then if you look at life cycle of products, they tend to simplify over time. So if you think of mechanical items or even software, the first couple of iterations tend to be, a little bit complex in terms of their functions and components. But a lot of the time after that, we spend simplifying it, making it easier to run and roll out. Now, the whole extended ECM world is been layered on top. It's been around a while. I think it's 2004 or 2005 since OpenText bought Exos, and the extended ECM concept's been around all that time, and it's been used, and certainly SAP customers use it a lot. But now you've got Dynamics, you've got Maximo, you've got Salesforce, you've got now obviously Office 365 with Teams. All these things are adding complexity to the world that we operate in. So our customers have been asking for more features, if you like, for their products, and the features they've been asking for inside Permissions Manager, and they've been asking for it with Permissions Manager because it is the leading product in this field. You think, as I said before, things evolve over time, but Permissions Manager remains the leading product for access control and information security operations inside these two environments. And I do separate content server, traditional or classic content server, a little bit from extended ECM systems, only because extended ECM systems bring their own information management and security, and the two have got to work together and lay over each other. But the requirements we're getting are around volume. I think Brian mentioned some of this on his intro, around volume. So, in the old days, we would have, a few hundred megabytes, maybe. Now, multiple terabytes is very common. Tens of millions of items is not uncommon. And these are being created through business workspaces or through other integration, other models, at a great rate. So you might have an education department has, a business workspace for each student, or a consumer goods company might have business workspaces for all of their relationships and all of their products and so on, and sales. So the volume is going up and the complexity is going up. In the old days, you might have, have open text, you have content suite with its own permissions model and so on and so forth. And then you'd be able to manage it in that environment. Now, as I mentioned before, we're managing Microsoft's access. And even if you just look at the Microsoft 365 world and look at Dynamics, if that's an option that people are looking at, each of those products has got their own access control or security. It's getting more complex. Records management is a big deal for people these days. We're seeing more and more customers really liking the fact that they can have this repository, the central library of managed lifecycle for their information with an RM, a really, really mature and solid RM offering on top of it. And we all know that a lot of people are selling add-ins to some of these products, but I don't think any of them really reach the same level that OpenText reaches in terms of functionality around this particular area. Customers are also asking us about implementation and support. So, we've always had a model, and I'm going to show you in a sec, we've always had a model around being able to use templates to workshop things, to create standard security models, access models. But people have come to us and said, we really want to do that work in our dev or our UAT environment, and then be able to move that across to our production environment. It's not always as simple as you might think, copy and paste, or sorry, cut and paste type your templates. But there are considerations around that using the transport engine and so on, which we'll get into a little bit in a minute. And the last thing is everybody's talking cloud. And I don't mean that as a definitive decision that everybody makes. Not everybody actually is moving to the cloud, but everybody asks about it. So we just need to touch on the fact that this product is and has for some time been cloud certified, both for Azure and AWS and so on, but also for the OT cloud. So if you are an OT cloud customer, or you're looking to be an OT cloud customer, this product works and is certified in that environment. So what have we added? Okay, one of the requirements I mentioned about volume, we've added the ability to support large numbers of related items. Then, and you'll know that through the collections function. Okay, so we've always, and I'm going to get into a demo in 1 minute. So we've always had the ability to be able to collect items and then use permissions manager against that collection. So what we've done, what we've found though, is there's some limitations there, and a couple of customers, including at least one on this call, have come to us and said, I really have a problem here because you're only allowing me to work on the items that are in front of me at the time. So if you've got, say you've got workspaces, tens of thousands of business workspaces or thousands of them, and you want to go and make changes to all of the documents that are in those workspaces that relate to a particular type of information or have common features. There were some limitations around that, so we're adding the ability to be able to do that through a couple of simple click boxes, and I'll show you how that works in a second. And as I mentioned, we already support collections, so the collection stuff itself is not new, but I will spend a couple of minutes just to show you how that works, because a lot of people don't use it to its full extent, and we really like people using the product as much as possible. The second thing we're adding is transport support for permissions templates. Now, I alluded to this in the previous slide, but essentially what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to design, test, and deploy a permissions model effectively across the production lifecycle, the software lifecycle, or deployment lifecycle. So you'll be able to take templates and groups from your dev environment, from your test environment, your UAT, and then transport them across to production. And there are a couple of things about that which are not obvious up front in terms of what you need to consider. So the dev team here has done a really good job in thinking that through. And as I think you know, they do a good job in terms of thinking this through rather than just throwing a basic piece of code out there. So we can synchronize that to the design and deployment activities that you're doing. Okay, so let's jump across and look at a system, and I'll show you how this collections piece works. But I will just quickly just mention to you that the permissions and collection is designed to be able to allow you, as I mentioned, to work on content regardless of location. So you'll see that. I'll just jump across to my demo system now. And I've got a, now I'm going to work in the classic view, if that's okay. Now we do support, as you guys would know, we do support the permissions manager does run in the smart view. However, this is, I'm actually showing you an alpha test system here. So this is actually pre-release, and some of those functions have been turned off at the moment. So I'm going to work from our classic view. And now, simple, straightforward stuff for people on the call who haven't used Permissions Manager before. Very simple introduction. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but very simple introduction. Hit the Permissions Manager dashboard, which you're all familiar with. All the features are turned on here. I'm logged on as admin. This system has got Brava installed, so you'll see a lot more flag tags across the top than you might see in your own environment. Most non-Brava or non-Brava environment would just have these ones here. But if I go back to the collections, and as I said, I'm not going to run through the functionality of Permissions Manager today. If you've got specific questions around that, feel free to put them in the chat. Brian will handle them, and we can cover them at the end. Looking at the time, it's 20 minutes past already, so we've got to keep moving. Okay, so here's a collection, and I just call this large collection. This system's only got a couple of thousand items in it, so it's pretty small. So I just went through and collected, I think, 600 odd items. Traditional, you can see through a collection that all the same functionality exists with your dashboard, except for the search button. You can't search within a collection. It doesn't make sense. It's logically not right. So all the other things work. One of the features that we did add a little while ago in both here and search was replace user, which is very handy. Anyway, you can see that these items exist in different places. So that's the benefit of a collection. Now, as you would know, if you've got items, and you run an advanced search, you can save that to a collection. And that's exactly what I did here. I simply went to a really simple advanced search and collected pretty much everything in the system, and then selected 600 items. So that's why you've got a number of things in different places. You can see things that are sitting inside, or you've got project workspaces as well. This system does have business workspaces installed, although it's not particularly configured. It's just a basic install. But what you'll see here is, now traditionally what you would have done is, if you wanted to make a change, you could get in here, and actually I'll just switch to virtual permissions, and you would come along and you might say, I'm going to add a group, add a demo CEO. So I'm going to update that and close it. So I'm running in virtual permissions here. So I'm not actually changing the permissions on the collection itself. I'm just changing it virtual mode. And what you would do traditionally was you would have selected those items, and it would have then made that and gone through and copied that setting to these items. And that's what you would have done. And it's very simple, very straightforward, except you'll see that it's only acting on the items in front of you, and not the items that are on the next screen. And you can see that this has got 633 items in it, but there is only 10 being displayed at the moment. So it's a little restrictive, and that's just the way that Content Server works with collections. So what we've done is we've added this button, entire collection. Now you can switch this on or off in the admin pages, and as you can do with most functions inside inside Permissions Manager. So if you switch it, click on Entire Collection, you can see that the boxes on the left-hand side are grayed out. So everything is now selected. And if I then say copy permissions on that one tag or entry, you get a slightly different result. Now, instead of just those items being shown, you'll get a count of all of the items that are being shown, including the different types. Now, you also get this warning here because effectively you're pushing it down to all the sub-items. So there's 176 folders have got content. And if I then preview this, you'll see, oops, okay. So just forgive the strange message at the top of the screen. That's just, as I said, this is a pre-release version. It was working last night when I tested this. So anyway, we'll just let it run. Now, the other thing that's happening here, which you might not be obvious, but you'll see there's a counter happening here. So the system is actually, the screen is actually refreshing in line with your refresh settings on the system. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to wait for 30 seconds while it does this. But essentially why I wanted to show you this was because the total number of items will now be the real number of items that you're going to affect, rather than the perceived list. So we're not far away now. I'm not going to go through this whole process. It does, as you say, it does take a couple of minutes to run, and we've only got a short time today. So here we are, 2 seconds, 1 second, here we are. So rather than 633, there's actually 1,318 items in that set of items. One item to be collected, to be skipped. If I click on details, it'll give me that information as well. So pretty smooth, pretty cool, and straightforward. As you can see, it's basically just building on the functionality we've already got. I won't execute this if it's okay, because this system is being used by multiple people. But that's essentially all it is. And as I mentioned before, in the admin pages, you've got control over that. Now it'll execute, and as you saw, it executes in exactly the same way as any other copy or change or replace function. You can switch to replace if you want. You can use all the virtual permissions functions if you want, and so on and so forth. That's coming very soon. So that's the collections, entire collection feature. Really simple, really straightforward to use. And in the slide deck that you're going to have access to afterwards, as well as the recording, there'll be these slides which will basically summarize what we've just seen. Now, the one thing to remember is that it does select all items, and it implies all the sub items, but you do have control. It also respects the limit. So if you've got a cascade limit of 500 items set up in your system, and the replace limit set to 500, then it'll respect that. It'll give you the same warning message that you get otherwise. And I've just covered this in the demo, but essentially it does give you the counts. So respecting the allowed the admin controls, all very straightforward. Hopefully that makes sense. Please do ask questions. And I see there's a flashing light there, Brian. So are there any questions around the collection side? We've only got 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to touch on this quickly.
No, just continue.
Okay.
I was able to answer.
Okay, great. All right. So the other feature that's coming in the next release, and by the way, both these features are part of your maintenance if you're an existing customer. So don't be worried about me turning around and saying you've got to pay more for a new version. That's not the case. Both of them are part of maintenance. The other one is around the transport of templates. So for this one, I'm going to jump across to a slightly different system and just give you a really quick rundown on the templates and virtual permissions side of things. You'll be familiar that we have a templates volume. So for those of you who have not been using it, there is a permissions template volume included with Permissions Manager, and in there you're able to define and save a template, and you can manage access to that. So using Permissions Manager, you can see it here that we've got access controls set for each one of those templates, And if I open up one of those templates, we've got all the different settings, very similar to the edit permissions screen that you'll see in Permissions Manager. So what are we adding with this new feature? We are adding the ability to be able to migrate those using the standard transport process inside Content Server. If you're not familiar with that, it's really straightforward. It's available through the Enterprise toolbar to authorize users, but essentially it's the mechanism to be able to take configurations from one system to another. That's pretty much the simple basic summary of it. And I know there's a lot of people on the call who've got a lot of experience with that sort of thing. So the idea is that now you're going to be able to add create a warehouse or add the templates to work to a transport warehouse and export those from the source system and then import them into the target system. Now, the reason I mentioned it before about and showed you the access controls on the templates themselves is that we support both levels of validation. So when you transport a set of templates from into a new system, it's going to do this verification for you as you do that transport. So it's going to verify that the groups exist, that the users exist, both for the template itself and within the templates. So that second screen you saw me show you when I opened up a template to show you the ACL lists, it's going to verify before you do the import or the deployment, I should say. It's going to verify that those groups exist and give you a chance to map them if you want to, or to create them if you want to. So if everything's going well, you'll end up with the screen here. So this is before you hit the deploy button. We're not showing on the screenshot here, but there's a deploy button underneath this. It's really simple, really straightforward. It's going to be essentially the same process that you follow for any other transport activity in Content Server or Extended ECM. And that's, unfortunately, this one I can't show you in demo, but it's coming soon. So in summary, we are supporting large volumes now through the collections function, and standard stuff, normal admin controls apply, and there's a new feature in the administrator page to do this. Highly relevant these days with Extended ECM, but also classic systems. So if you are using a classic content suite, it's working fine. Permissions templates are now transportable. We just saw that. And both these features are coming in the new release of Permissions Manager. We are supporting, I think I showed in some of those screenshots, we're supporting 20.4. It's been out a month or so, and our regression testing has been completed. So we are supporting 20.4. These new features, I say, should be compatible with earlier versions. We have not completed yet all of the regression testing on earlier versions of Content Suite and Extended ECM, but it should be supported. So we believe, and if there's a problem with that, if there's got any issues, just come back to us under support, and we'll work with you on those things. The reason I mentioned that I'm a little bit cautious there is because, as you might know, OpenText themselves made a number of changes between 16.6, 16.2.8. They started making some changes, mainly around the Smart UI, which doesn't affect this part of the system too much, but you just need to be a little bit cautious when you start applying new versions of modules to those older or the previous releases. And which takes me back to the comprehensive tool. As I mentioned when we started, that Permissions Manager is still being widely deployed around the world, and in place increasingly on large, complex environments, and still adding value, which we're very pleased to hear, of course. And at that point, Brian, I think I'm open for questions.
Okay, let me put my camera back on.
Okay.
Yeah, not Not too many questions. There was one earlier, but it was related to Brava, Alistair, and it was just, do you need to have Brava? Because I think when you were showing permissions manager, you showed how it extends to the permissions that are, we can control the permissions in Brava too, which is a nice add. But you don't need to own Brava to use permissions manager, was the clarification there, of course.
Oh, no, no, of course not, no.
Yeah. Comment though, I do have a comment. It seems to be that people, I mean, these two features here of being able to basically change an entire collection is useful when you're configuring and setting up your business workspaces. And then you're using your safe searches to create the collections to make those changes to the content, it seems, to set up that unique situation you may have in your business workspace as you go into extended ECM, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And then, of course, you want to do this, and what this leads to is you use the template feature is a very common thing people use to stamp out those permissions, and then you're going to want to test it out on your test system. So now you have a way to use the templates with collections on large sets of contents as you're setting. It kind of all dovetails together, right?
Yeah.
And you can do it in your test systems and easily migrate it to production is kind of the storyline that I'm picking up from this here.
Yeah, that's a good summary, Brian. It's yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how this area has evolved over the years. It's become more and more relevant to these systems.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mouthful, I guess, when we get it out there, but that's just the nature of these content systems too, and the complexity of the way you're trying to set up a single source of truth for whether it's your HR records, which tend to be a little more complex that we have with customers, tied in with whatever that line of business system is, like success factors or something along that, which is different from what your ERP documents may be looking like, or and even when you get into things like Maximo, right, with asset management, those document sets, and you want to have this single point of truth, you need a robust tool set to be able to set the permissions so that you can enable everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because you're right, those sorts of documents and that information, organizations are far more focused on audit these days too. So if you're a financial organization, or you're working in the health sector, or you're working in education, then it's quite likely that you're going to have an internal audit team that's going to want to come and inspect these documents and verify the access controls around them on a regular or semi-regular basis. You need to be able to respond to those things quickly.
So by having that single point of truth, you can apply records management from Content Suite much easier, and then give one place for them to come in, I guess.
Yeah, and if they need to have temporary access, for example, to that information, you can give them temporary access through these mechanisms. If they say, we want to see all records, that relate to this part of the business, regardless of what your taxonomy looks like, and regardless of how you've set up your structure.
As opposed to letting them in through the line of business application again, like success factors in, or SAP in.
Because as soon as you put extended ECM in, you're actually providing another door. So I want to verify that door as well as the primary access. Yeah, of course.
Okay, well, hey, we're about 4 minutes over. We're pretty close to keeping it to the 30 minutes, so that's a plus. And I want to thank everyone for coming to the session today. And we're happy to be hosting these things, and hopefully you and your family are looking forward to the holidays that are coming up here, and of course staying safe out there. So again, thank you for coming. This is Brian at Fastman, and thanks Alistair for presenting today, and have a good rest of your day.